Hello from Evie with the new haircut. So today I've got my dressing gown on, which means one thing: reading. So I thought I'd switch up a bit today and we'd do some Let's Not Meet Reddit stories. So I found some where the titles look somewhat interesting and I'm gonna give them a read. So Ronnie, shall we get into it? Yeah. So the first one is titled, I waved back at a man. Now I think he wants to hurt me. Every day I walk home from school with my friend because she lives only a little bit away from me, so our routes line up. At the start of the school year, we noticed there was a man, unusually looking at us from his window while we walked home from school. Found it a little weird, but ultimately didn't think much of it. Sus. A few months ago, after the heat of the summer died down a bit, he started sitting out on his porch whilst we were walking by. Usually, he would just smile at us. Sometimes I smiled back and usually just ignored him, which is normal behaviour. If somebody smiles at you, of course you're going to just like smile back. If you're British anyway, because that's common courtesy. One day, as I was walking by his house, he waved to me from where he was sitting. I stopped and waved back at him. Don't ever wave back at people. I have friends who's done that and they've managed to get a stalker from it. And told him to have a nice afternoon as I walked past. It felt a little weird because he didn't reply, but eventually I forgot about the whole thing. Once my mother was at work and I was alone at our house, I noticed him walking past my house several times through my window. I felt very creeped out and uncomfortable. So you should. I considered talking to my parents about it just in case, but I ultimately convinced myself he wasn't doing anything wrong, so it didn't really matter. Mate, he walked past your house several times looking through the window and you don't think he's doing anything wrong? Yesterday I walked home from school alone because I stayed behind with some other kids outside the school for a few hours since we had art club that day, and I didn't want to walk home just to have come back fairly soon after. I had bought myself a nice pair of wired headphones a few weeks with money. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. A few weeks with money I'd been saving up for a long time. I don't have a job. I was playing them over one ear as I was walking home. On the way home, there was a public lot with a stable on it that I like to cut through to get to my yard as quick as I can rather than walking around the property. Sometimes people like to hang around it to meet up, but there wasn't anyone on it that I could see. No. As I rounded a corner on the stable, someone grabbed the back of my t-shirt. From the way they were grabbing it, I could see part of their hand. I jerked forward and they grabbed the top part of my headphones. The wire was at the bottom part of my neck and it got stuck for a moment. And I remember feeling like I couldn't get away. Something very bad was going to happen. Oh. That's my only reaction to these kind of things, just oh. The wire eventually snapped and I took off running as fast as I could, screaming. They let go of my shirt and I hopped the half-length fence to our property and I ran as fast as I could out to the sidewalk in front of my house because I was worried that I would take too long on the lock if they were following me. By the time I actually got to the sidewalk point, I was crying and I felt like I was going to collapse because I was so scared. When I looked over my shoulder, I couldn't see anyone, but I kept running until I reached my friend's house in case whoever was there was still around. Oh yes, so just lead them to your friend's house instead. Yeah, that's cool. Especially if your friend's the same age if you're young. When I got there, I was in tears and it took a bit to explain the situation because they couldn't understand me. I tried calling my mother, but she wouldn't pick up the phone. My friend's mum called the police and they came to check things out. There was nobody at the stables and they told me that it was most likely some kid trying to mess around, and they escorted me home to my mother, who was waiting there for me. Anyway, I didn't tell them about the old man. I was worried they would think I was crazy, considering he hadn't technically done anything wrong, but there's something in my mind that keeps telling me that it was him who grabbed me in the stables. Yeah, that man does sound a little bit sus. When I was walking home from school today, I brought a screwdriver. I'm so bad at reading, I'm so sorry. I love reading, but I'm so bad at it. I brought a screwdriver with me in case I needed to defend myself. I also had my friend with me. My mother offered to pick me up from school, but I was worried that if I had shown how the encounter had affected me, then it would make things worse. I also avoided the stables, and my friends made sure I made it to the door. But sure is spelled S-U-R-W, so sure. The guy on his porch wasn't there today, and I'm still not fully sure if it's him or not. I feel terrible that my headphones broke, but I can't help but wonder what would have happened if he didn't. I will update if anything else happens. I am using a spare account in case any personal details not in this post can be found on my main account. Okay, so that was weird. First thing, if you're gonna walk somewhere dodgy and isolated, don't do it on your own. Don't do it when there's no one around. That is just a big red flag. And don't wave at people. I've learned off friends not to wave at strangers because it does end bad. Literally, my friend was getting like followed by this guy just because she waved at him, and like he'd be walking past our shop back and forth all the time waiting for her. It's fucking creepy and it's fucking weird. Don't stalk people. Don't be weird. Okay, next one. Okay, this one's called I don't know if I would have made it out of the woods if I had done what he wanted me to do. Sounds weird. I keep showing the bad side of my face. This is my good side. This is a red side. Hello, I just came across this subreddit and gosh, some of these are terrifying. I do have a story of something that happened to me from a long time ago, but in hindsight, it was really dumb of me. And I feel terribly dumb now. So I've always been hesitant to tell a lot of people. I know about it, except for my psychiatrist law. You know, it's bad when there's a psychiatrist involved. And I always apologise for long posts, so it's so hard not to hear. There were some other conversations had with this man, named John. It was mostly him talking, but I left some of them out for length's sake. This was a few years ago. It was pretty late, past 1:30, 2 AM. I was living with this boy who was pretty abusive. We don't stand that. We don't stand abusive men. And he had gotten really jealous at this party we were at earlier that night. Not even an hour after we had gotten home, he tossed me out into our front porch and locked the door behind me. I was knocking and pleading for him to please let me back inside. I was still wearing what I had worn to the party and it was freezing out. I wasn't sure what to do. He had my phone, purse and wallet in the house with him, so I just sat on the porch crying. When he turned off the lights both inside and outside of the house, I knew he wasn't going to let me back in. I felt so helpless and cold. I thought about knocking on my neighbour's door, though he didn't have many. Didn't have many what? Doors? What the fuck is wrong with me? But I had anxiety about waking any of them up and causing trouble for my boyfriend. Boyfriend, more like fucking scum. So instead, I decided I would try and walk to the gas station and motel, which was like a little less than a mile away, so I could use their phone to try and call a girlfriend of mine or see if I could sleep over with her. Good idea. I'd be so helpless if someone took my phone. I don't know anybody's numbers off by heart. Ironically enough, the road I was walking on, Donna Pass Road, so the freezing cold was fitting. But anyway, a little bit into the walk, this tall white pickup truck was approaching on the opposite side of the road I was on. I tried not to make eye contact for obvious reasons, but then I heard the truck stopping and beginning to make a U-turn. My heart just started pounding. I just about froze up, but forced myself to speed walk at the very least. Oh, no. Like, in the past, as a teenager, an early teenager, like 13, 14, I've had many white vans, like, pull up next to me as I've been riding home, and oh, I've just legged it. Scary shit, scary shit. The truck pulled up to me and this guy rolled down his window and asked what I was doing out this late. I told him how I was going to meet my friend at the gas station and that she was expecting me. He sort of smiled and offered me a ride. I said no thank you. Well done. Citing that I shouldn't hitchhike. He told me, well, good, I don't pick up hitchhikers or anyone. You don't look like a hitchhiker, though. You just look like you need some help. He just kept driving next to me and told me I shouldn't think he was a creep, and he pulled out what looked like a police badge and told me that he had just gotten off duty, which is why he was in civilian clothing and out so late. He said he wouldn't mind driving next to me just to make sure I get to where I was heading safely. I was naive and a bit too trusting of his kindness and I can't say that word, credentials. There's nothing in there. And when he offered me a ride again, I said that it would be nice because the gas station wasn't that far away anyway. He popped the door open for me and I hopped in. The radio was low, it was a little messy, the ashtray was full of cigarettes. There were a lot of newspapers on the passenger floor. As I was moving my feet, some of the papers shifted, showing a pair of handcuffs, some coffee cups, empty water bottles, rags, a highlight coloured bandana, and some other things. He apologised, saying it was the truck he took hunting, that it was super warm. Who the fuck takes handcuffs hunting? Excuse me. Excuse me. I'm gonna do handcuff the deer so it can't run away. Stop. So I was happy and I didn't mind at all. He told me his name was John. He asked why I was so scantily dressed without a jacket, and I started to tell him about the party and the fight I'd been in with my boyfriend. He was super charming and attentive. He even laughed that he could go back and arrest him. I asked about him and he told me about his family. He was a young dad, he had a wife, a daughter, a son and a dog. And I told him it was like he had the perfect little family, and he laughed and said he certainly did. Then it sort of clicked for me to ask him. I could use his phone, but he said no, because he needed to save his battery. Can I just add that I have barely stuttered? Be proud of me, please. Be proud of me. We were approaching the gas station and he drove right past it. I politely said, oh, I think that's the one, but he didn't answer me. I felt sick to my stomach. My heart started pounding. I started getting choked up. My eyes started tearing up as I was looking out the windows and watching the light behind us getting farther and farther away. It was very hard for me to even speak, but somehow I murmured, asking if he could please turn around, and he ignored me. Whenever I would look at him, he just looked empty-eyed and emotionless, totally dead and glazed. I looked back out the window and down the road to see if maybe we were going slow enough that I could just leap out the car without seriously injuring myself. I remember always hearing, never go to the second location, but I thought about the possibility of jumping out and breaking an ankle and how it would be a lot harder to get away with 1 foot as opposed to 2. Debating with myself that there was snow on the ground, but then again, snow is hard to get along in, especially when you're not fully clothed. I feel so dumb now too because I wasn't even tied up or anything. I was just so scared. Like there was nothing but trees, an empty road and us. Oh, no. I hate man. Ugh, creepy. I was crying pretty badly at this point and asked if I could please borrow his phone again. I don't know why I even asked. And he told me to stop talking. And he started talking underneath his breath saying, girls shouldn't be out so late. You shouldn't have been alone this late. Look what you're doing to me. Dressed like a slut. Bruh. And other derogatory things too. As he kept saying these terrible things. Too many to type out here. I wasn't even responding, I was just crying and trying to think past the fear I was feeling. I remembered the pair of handcuffs I remember seeing underneath the papers beneath my feet. I used them a little, I don't know how to describe it, like a scoopy motion. I managed to use my feet to scoop the handcuffs up and use my heels and toes to push them under the bottom of my seat as far as I could. I was thinking of different things I could try and do to help myself, like if we were close enough to some upcoming lights or structures, if I ever made it to them, I could just grab the wheel and cause us to crash into them. Or maybe, how if I got lucky enough for a cop to pass us, I could grab the wheel and swerve, so he would appear to be a drunk driver and we'd get pulled over. I guilty thought about the possibilities of this man is just having a weird night, and how if I did anything it would hurt him. But I told myself that sort of thinking sort of got me into this mess. He pulled off-road where there was still woods on both sides of us. On his side, the wooded The wooded trees were close to the road. On mine, there was a small gap fully covered in thick, I don't know how many feet of snow, before the trees thickly picked up, maybe 10 to 16 yards away. He turned off the car and Coulter said there was something wrong with the car and to get out with him. As he grabbed the keys, I'm choking on my As he grabbed the keys and was stepping out the car, I grabbed onto the centre console and cried and pleaded not to make me get out with him because it was too cold. He turned around to face me, his door still open, and shouted at me to get out of the car because we had to go and check the truck bed hatch. I dug my fingernails deeper into the console, thinking my cries of no and head shaking would cause him to come around to my side of the car and drag me out himself. I was crying and said, "Please John, I'm so cold and scared." I was thinking of everything I ever heard. Humanise yourself. Use first names. He stared at me in this way I can't even describe it to this day. I don't even know how to start. He got back in the car and I slipped towards my window, scared he would drag me over the console. He turned off the headlights and everything just looked dark blue. He stared at the steering wheel for what felt like years before lighting a cigarette and looking out his window and back at me and back out of his window. He heard me shuffle my feet on the newspapers. I was just adjusting my legs, but while still staring out the window, he told me if I thought about running, he had a quick way to get me where he wanted me. And oddly enough, I was sort of thinking of running minutes before that, but resonated that if he wanted me out the car, then I should definitely stay in. Otherwise, he could chase me or shoot me in case he had hunting rifles in the back. I didn't dare look. I'm glad I was right. I think at that point I sort of hit some sort of button on my reserve, and instead of panic, there was numbness and exhaustion. There was still an occasional hot tear or two, but I remember being numb. I talked to a psychiatrist about this kind of thing, and he thinks it just came from my ex-boyfriends giving me PTSD. Seems plausible. Ex-boyfriends like to do that. Take it from me. It was dead quiet, but I finally, just barely audibly told him that my friend was still waiting for me and asked about his wife and children. And he flatly said he didn't have a wife or children and that the house was empty. I asked him what he was thinking about and he said, "I'm thinking about what to do with you." He didn't say it angrily, he just said it flatly and coldly, which sort of scared me more. I did start getting worked back up to a cry at that point, and he told me not to cry, turned the car on, offering me some heat. I just cried and said I wanted to go home. Eventually he started driving and kept driving until we were approaching a gas station. I was gauging the right time to reach out for the wheel, but before I could, he started slowing down. Whilst pulling up, he told me not to tell anyone or he would find me. Then he told me all he was doing was teaching me a lesson not to hitchhike with strangers. He was almost coming to a complete stop when he told me to get out before he changes his mind. Before he could even get another look at me to assess my understanding, I was already down, out of a truck and sprinting towards the gas station. The panic was overwhelming me, but then I stopped and remembered to try and see his license plate. I turned around, but only caught the blur of the last 3 numbers as he was driving off. I ran inside and asked the clerk behind the counter to please call the police. That's good. I waited until the officer got there, and I'll be honest, I was a little scared it would be John. My fears melted away, when the new-faced policeman got there. I gave him a description of John, his appearance, the vehicle colour and type, the parts of the licence plate number I had caught, the fact he said he was an off-duty cop, just basically anything I could. I asked him if he could look at the camera, and the officer disappeared in the back for a little bit, then came back out saying there was nothing on him. I asked if I would be able to look, and the officer said no, and asked me if I didn't trust him, and I told him of course I did. The officer gave me a ride to my friends, lecturing me for hitchhiking, consisting of him repeatedly asking if I knew who Ted Bundy was. Of course I knew who Ted Bundy was. I was just too naive to think it could never happen to me, and I was desperate for some warmth. I never heard anything back about that report that was made, so I would try and follow up, and each time I did, they never got back to me aside from this one time I was told my case number didn't exist, but that didn't stop me from trying to follow up. Throughout the months and years, I asked my friends whose home I'd slept at that night if they ever heard of any like weirdness or anything since that incident had happened to her or anyone up there, and she always says no. So I sort of let it go and tried to tell myself that maybe he actually was just trying to teach me a lesson or something. I mean, I definitely never hitchhiked again, so if that was a lesson, it certainly worked. I never heard anything back having to do with the case. I never heard of any other odd experiences up there. Maybe it was just one man trying to teach me something, but honestly, sometimes I think I tell myself all of that to help me sleep better at night. It had all felt really real. Even if it wasn't real, I'm really glad I didn't get out of the car in the woods that night. Well, so if you didn't know already, don't hitchhike. Don't ever accept a lift from a stranger. I'd say especially men, but women are capable too. I forgot her name. Have you heard of that woman serial killer who just killed loads of men? Yeah, so all of you, be safe. Don't get into strangers' cars. Don't be walking on your own at night. So I think I'm only gonna do 2 today. If you like these Reddit videos, like just let me know and I'll continue doing them. I can do different subreddits too, but I like Let's Not Meet because it's like, it's scary because it's real. It's like real situations. That's scarier than any ghost or monster. Humans are dangerous and fucking weird. Anyway, if you did enjoy this kind of video, please let me know down below, and also leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe. Bye!